one of inheritance. And the reason we've focused on this particular topic this particular week is because of another celebrity in this instance, Daniel Craig, who's come out and stated that he's not going to be leaving an awful lot of his money to his children.
What was the headline there? Inheritance is...
Daniel Craig says inheritance is distasteful.
Distasteful.
Yeah, yeah. So again, it's an article. You know, if you haven't heard about this and haven't seen it, please go and read it, and then think about your own perceptions of inheritance. I know that when this was shared earlier in the week or back to end of last week, there was, and I tend to agree with this, I have to say, there was a sort of feeling that, you know, if you're extremely wealthy and you let's say you've got, I don't know, 100 million in the bank, and you decide, I'm not going to leave much of my inheritance, let's say 10%, that's still 10 million. Yeah. For most people, if they leave their inheritance in totality, it's a drop in the ocean compared to, you know, a 10 million. So it's very much a much smaller number, and the more children you have, the more you have to, you know, share that out amongst the family members, and then the amount becomes smaller and smaller. Then you have all the arguments and you have the debates. For example, you've got a house and it's got to be split, so that means very clear clarification in a will beforehand. So it's, you know, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because for people with a very small amounts of income and wealth, actually it could be that launch pad, it could be that platform for their children to pay off university debts or put down their deposit on a house, especially at the moment where, you know, getting onto the housing ladder in terms of ownership is extremely difficult. Yeah. So I think it's a difficult one to debate. That's what I'm saying here, Tom, because it depends on your situation. Ideally, we'd have a society where you didn't need inheritance, where everybody was looked after. You didn't have a system that created capital or wealth in such a way where inheritance was possible. That's certainly from my perspective. But we don't live in that system. And as we are living in that system, it's really that sort of philosophical engagement with what we call the empirical, what is, as opposed to the normative, what we would like to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know what quite even I think about it. I mean, I would say the vast majority of the population are in favour of money being passed on through inheritances from parents to their kids or kids, grandkids, whatever. As you say, for fabulous reasons, to try and give them a leg up in life, a head start, to pay off their student debts, get them on the housing ladder is probably the biggest reason why parents want to leave money to their children, to help them get their own house and be secure and generally just not have to struggle, not have a life of struggle. And if they have kids, so the original parents, grandkids, you know, for them to be looked after and well cared for and so forth, and not want for anything. So, you know, the system of inheritance is something that people generally sort of work hard all their life and try to pay off a mortgage and so forth. So, you know, partly so that they can leave something for their kids and grandkids. It's sort of built into our system and possibly even into our genes. It's not quite the same in every country in the world. Of course, in poverty-stricken countries, in developing world countries, there isn't, you know, people are struggling to survive. There's no accumulation of wealth. There's no wealth through owning their own home or having large sums of money in the bank or anything, you know, stocks and shares or anything like that. And of course, a lot of countries are not so focused around home ownership, and as we are in the UK, many quite developed countries people rent. You know, the vast majority of people rent rather than own their own home, and that's just normal. And of course, in our society, over the last 20 to 25 years, there's been this enormous housing market boom that the price of houses has risen sort of fairly exponentially compared to wages. And so, you know, it's not unusual at all now for somebody's assets to be £500,000 when they die because they own a home that's now worth 400 grand plus. So, and that might be just a modest semi-detached house, but it's, you know, that's the nature of the housing boom, particularly in the south of the country, and particularly in and around London. You know, you own a broom cupboard in parts of London, it's worth £500,000. So, so it's quite normal now, really, for people when they pass away. It's quite a common thing that they'll have £500,000 to leave to their kids. I mean, we're also in this extraordinary situation that the housing, because the housing boom and all the issues to do with what makes homes, the price of homes escalate and escalate and escalate, to do with wealthy people property developing, you know, buying second homes, holiday homes, becoming property developers, investing in property, owning 30, 40,
and
50,
not building,
200,
Tom.
500 homes.
Not building.
And we're not, and at the same time, the government not building affordable housing.
Even
So
though
we
they're
have this
telling us that
situation-
what they are. They're lying to us.
Yeah, just lying. Yeah, just making promises they don't keep or saying they have when they haven't. Of course. So we've got this massive problem that we've got homelessness, we've got a shortage of housing that's affordable, and yet we've got an increasing number of very wealthy people buying up all the houses and therefore raising the price. You know, the price goes up and up and up because of supply and demand. And if well-off people have got plenty of money to buy the houses and keep buying them, the overall cost of housing will continue to rise, as we've seen for about 25 years. So what was the last thing I just wanted to say about this, about that, is that we used to have this situation that the majority of people that were working and earning reasonable money in the past have been able to get a mortgage, you know, something like 2.5 times their salary, or, you know, three and a half times their single person salary, 2.5 times a joint salary or whatever. And that could, you know, with a bit of a deposit, that could buy them a mortgage to own a home. No chance now. You know, you're looking at 10 times someone's salary for them to, you know, in much of the country. People would, you know, to get a mortgage, they need sort of 10 times what they're earning, or the value of the house is 10 times their annual salary or more. So we're now in this situation, I think, where people, particularly people under 40, less and less and less people under the age of 40 are going to be able to get a house. And more people, the only or the first time that they're able to get their own home is when their parents die and they inherit money, rather than they got a job. They're in their early 20s, say, and they got a job and they get a mortgage and they can own their own home and pay that off over 25 years or whatever. Now people can't do that. And now, you know, for a lot of people, their only chance of owning their own home is through inheriting money. And that overall, that's storing up all sorts of problems for our society, including people not being able to afford where they're living, still paying rent, etc. Once they're retired, trying to get their pension, you know.
Well, perhaps the solution, Tom, will come in terms of the impact of climate change.
Yeah.
Because I know that there's already been a suggestion that the billions that are being made available now in order to combat climate change, one of the suggestions in terms of the pot that exists in the UK, that it goes into family planning. Because ultimately, the only way out of this for some is we've got to dramatically reduce the number of children that we give birth to, because population control is possibly, you know, with the resources being utilised at the quickest rate ever. At the same time, the population growth across the planet is at its quickest rate ever. So, where the population is going like this and resources are going like this, so those resources will never come back. We can create synthetic ones, but the natural resources will never return. So their argument is we've got to bring the population down at the same point. And this is a discussion for